So you feel that quiet worry creeping in when you notice your loved one breathing pauses at night. Those irregular gasps breaking the silence, or perhaps your own restless sleep. It leaves you kind of foggy, unfocused by morning, struggling to keep up with the day's demands. Not your fault for overlooking at these subtle things. Caregiving already stretches your attention across so many fronts, from medication to moods to meals. Sleep apnea isn't merely just loud snoring, whether it's daytime tiredness or just simply part of aging. It really quietly heightens the risk that built slowly over months and years, affecting both caregiver and those that are living with dementia in ways that are not necessarily immediately obvious. This oversight can foster a lot of unspoken anxiety about what the future might hold, perhaps more rapid cognitive changes or increased daily challenges. It layers a sense of isolation, helplessness onto the already full emotional load of caregiving. So, over time, it might contribute to moments of deeper exhaustion or doubt, amplifying the quiet toll without anyone realizing the biological connections at play. This pattern is not something that is rooted in neglect, oversight, or any lack of attentiveness on your part. It's really a common gap in awareness about how disrupted sleep patterns can influence brain health in systemic physiological ways that extend far beyond just feeling sleepy. Let's picture Elena. She's a caregiver in her late 50s. She's laying awake in the dim glow besides her husband, who's been living with early stage dementia for a couple of years now. So the room is still, but she hears that sudden pause in his breathing. And then, let's say, a silence that stretches just a bit too long, followed by a sharp choking gasp that startles him half awake. And then, of course, his eyes flutter open in confusion before he drifts back to sleep. And it happens a few minutes in an hour, night after night, and it's slowly fragmenting their rest, both of them. By the morning, he's more disoriented than usual, mixing up the time of the day or forgetting familiar routine, while she might be just dragging through coffee preparation with heavy eyelids, her own thoughts blurring as she tries to jot down notes about yesterday's doctor call. But then she brushes it off and she's just like, well, that's just how he sleeps these days with everything going on. She attributes that to his growing confusion to the dementia alone, and then her fatigue to the endless to do list. But as weeks turn into months, his memory lapses deepen unexpectedly, and then her own clarity wanes, making simple decisions feel very quite labored. One quiet dawn, sitting alone at the kitchen table with her coffee. Let's say it's getting cold now. And she begins to stare out the first light. She feels like a wave of regret that washes over and notice this pattern sooner. Connected the dots. Maybe things wouldn't be shifting so quickly now? Am I letting us both down by not seeing it? I am Rosabelle Silfil, a voice for dementia caregivers, sharing from the realities many of you navigate every day. In today's video, I am going to be teaching you 3 dangers of untreated sleep apnea as a dementia risk. First, how it leads to repeated oxygen deprivation in the brain and the inflammatory cascades that follows. Second, its connection to the impaired clearance and buildup of Alzheimer's related proteins during disruptive sleep cycles. And third, the heightened overall risk of various dementia types based on longitudinal research findings. On its core, untreated sleep apnea disrupts the brain essential nightly restoration processes. It creates a chronic physiological stress that elevates vulnerability to neurodegeneration. Over time, this is a biological and systemic process, not a reflection of anyone's oversight, strength, or daily efforts. See, caregivers often observe those noticeable pauses in breathing during the night and sometimes accompanied by loud snoring, choking sounds or restlessness, tossing that leaves sheets tangled by morning, resulting in both parties feeling more irritable, forgetful, or emotionally unsteady as the day begins. In the brain, these apneas, this brief cessation of breathing, it causes intermittent hypoxia, meaning a drop of oxygen levels, which triggers a widespread inflammation and oxidative stress. It damages neurons and vascular structures gradually as the brain's blood flow works overtime to compensate during these episodes. There is research from a comprehensive 2022 meta analysis published in the Journal of Sleep Research, drawn from over 20 studies, indicates that this hypoxia it is associated with a 43% increased risk of developing any kind of neurocognitive disorder, including dementias. There are many other studies like this that further explore how these oxygen fluctuations lead to endothelial dysfunction in brain vessels, mirroring early pathological changes seen in Alzheimer's and vascular dementia. Based on brain imaging from participants with moderate to severe apnea, this cumulative damage builds quietly, often without dramatic symptoms at first. The brain adapts short term, but it pays a longer term price in resilience. This is the body's physiological reaction to obstructed airways that occur involuntarily during sleep stages. So, willpower alone cannot prevent these effects because the oxygen deprivation and resulting inflammation happens unconsciously, deep in the night's cycles, by pausing any daytime intentions or efforts without directly addressing the underlying breathing interruptions. Today's episode is brought to you in part by Eco Hydrogen Water. If you are looking for a gentle way every day to support your hydration and cellular health during long caregiving days, I personally rely on the Eco Flask. It is definitely my go to portable hydrogen water bottle that I carry with me every day. Do you hear the sizzling? I fill it with the filtered water. I run the quick cycle, takes about 10 minutes, and it generates up to 8 ppm of molecular hydrogen right in this 12-ounce bottle. It infuses it with selective antioxidants that might help reduce that oxidative stress to support clear energy and focus without any additives. Visit Eco Water to learn more about the Eco Flask at your own pace. It is definitely something that can become part of your routine. Continuing the conversation on caregivers, how they notice how fragmented sleep from apnea appears to exacerbate memory lapses, confusion, or even subtle moods, where morning feels heavier and details from previous days slips away more easily than expected. Neurologically poor or interrupted sleep impairs the brain's natural clearance mechanisms, particularly the glymphatic system, which flushes out toxins, toxic proteins like amyloid beta and tau during deep sleep phases. So, when apnea disrupts sleep phases, clearance efficiency drops. It leads to gradual accumulation in the brain regions critical for memory and cognition. See, there's a case study from Mayo Clinic in 2019 that involves the PET scans of over 300 participants, and it found that individuals with untreated sleep apnea had approximately 4.5 higher levels of tau protein in an area that is linked to early Alzheimer's changes compared to those without apnea. So, see, building on this, a 2021 analysis from the Alzheimer's Drugs Discovery Foundation reviewed longitudinal data and reported that over a twofold increased risk for cognitive decline in apnea sufferers is attributed in part to the impaired protein clearance, with similar patterns that have been observed in amyloid plaques as seen in postmortem studies. This buildup does not happen overnight, but it definitely occurs through repeatedly sleep disruptions, quietly shifting the brain's internal environment towards vulnerability. This doesn't indicate inadequacy in your care routines or daily observations. It is simply the inherent way disrupted sleep cycles hinders the brain built-in maintenance functions, which rely on uninterrupted rest to operate effectively. Willpower alone will fail also here because the protein accumulation and clearance processes are passive. They do occur during a very specific sleep stage. They cannot be willed into efficiency. And it is not something that you can postpone for later. They do require that consistent quality sleep to function, not just determination or better habits during waking hours. So, see, caregivers absorb that over extended periods, whether it's months or years of this untreated apnea. It seems to correlate with the broader cognitive shifts, such as increased agitation, disorientation, or even accelerated progression in existing dementia patients, where those who were once manageable days now become more unpredictable. See, this cumulative effects from chronic hypoxia and inflammation heightens the odds of developing various dementia types. There's a more recent study in 2024 from the University of Michigan Medicine, that analyzed the health records from thousands of older adults that linked moderate to severe sleep apnea to a higher dementia diagnosis overall, with this risk elevated up to 5% in later life, particularly among women because of their hormonal factors that influence vascular health. So, now complementing that, there's another large scale study in 2025 by the UK Biobank study that examined over 2 million patient records, found that a 29% increased risk specifically for vascular dementia in those treated with sleep apnea through interventions like CPAP therapy. They appear to mitigate or even neutralize the elevated risk when, of course, started early. And this is all evidenced by follow up data over 5 years. So these risks extend beyond the Alzheimer's to include frontotemporal and Lewy body dementia, especially because apnea's vascular strain affects multiple brain pathways. See, it's not just a matter of laziness or denial or insufficient vigilance. It is progressive biological toll of repeating hypoxia, low oxygen of the brain, and then also the vascular integrity and the neural networks built silently without that intervention. So, willpower cannot counter these long term risks alone because they arise from untreated physiological interruptions during sleep, necessitating target medical screenings. And here is where I feel it's more than just let's get to sleep better. Whenever it concerns sleep patterns, perhaps, those uneven breaths or persistent daytime drowsiness, you begin by noting them gently without adding the pressure to yourself or your loved one. Maybe you keep a simple log occurrences over a week or two. You kind of track how they align with their energy levels or the cognitive moments for the next day. And then from there, I recommend you consider consulting a healthcare provider for an accessible sleep study. Of course, it's recommended by resources like the National Institute of Health or the Alzheimer's Association websites, which outlines very straightforward at home or clinical based options. Early detection opens a door to supports like CPAP devices. For those who cannot take the CPAP, there's also a surgery small device implantable to help obtain that steady oxygen throughout the night. Disruptive sleep impacts the entire household biology. So you want to approach this as a shared health consideration rather than a solo fix. You might want to incorporate small supportive habits where possible, like consistent hydration or a calm evening wind down to complement any medical insights. So this gentle anchors addresses the underlying biology first and then foster space for any steadier, more restorative nights over time. And I want to leave you with this. What might seem as inevitable or accelerated decline, like linked to apnea, is in truth the brain's subtle signal of that unmet need for that consistent oxygen supply and uninterrupted rest. It highlights areas where additional support could make a difference. Now, for ongoing support in organizing care details like sleep tracking or appointment notes, check out innerhive.com. This is an AI powered app that records and summarizes conversations with a simple tap highlighting key points and the next steps to help keep everyone aligned without the mental strain. It is a tool shared by other caregivers, so feel free to visit and see how it might fit into your routine. So remember, you are not alone in here, and I will see you in my next video.